What's up, guys? We're back with another video today, and today we're going to be going over landing spots for the biggest free agents slash trade targets this offseason. And there are going to be a few boring ones just for the fact that I want to see how accurate I can be with these predictions and not necessarily as clickbaity, if that makes sense. So we're going to go through these. A lot of them are switching teams, but there are some that are being retained, and we'll get to those more towards the end. So first, we're going to start off with DeAndre Hopkins, who is currently a Cardinal. Things aren't looking so hot in Arizona, ironically, but he is likely to be traded this offseason. They're looking at not having Kyler Murray back for the beginning of next year because of the torn ACL at the end of the year this year. And DeAndre Hopkins is, getting up in age, looking to go to a contender most likely, or at least someone with some foundation. My prediction for where DeAndre Hopkins will end up is the New England Patriots, who currently don't have that wide receiver one. And DeAndre Hopkins has loved to fill the slot as he can very well as that wide receiver one on the team. And working with Bill Belichick, Mac Jones, I think that they really need someone like Hopkins as that number one guy. And now they have Bill O'Brien back. I really like that fit there. I was also pondering the Ravens, but there's so much that's contending on Lamar coming back, and I'm really not sure if he will. It's looking more and more like he won't because they seem to be very far away on negotiating a contract there. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick the Patriots for that one. I think that's a very realistic chance that would happen, and I think he would be a great fit for the New England Patriots. So that's my number one, DeAndre Hopkins. Number two, we're talking free agency here. It would be Derek Carr to the New Orleans Saints. There's a few contingencies here. Number one, the Saints are in a bad situation. There's going to be people fired if they don't do well in the next couple years. They don't have a draft pick to pick a quarterback this year. They have now the number 30 overall pick because of the Sean Payton trade, where they were compensated by the Broncos for Sean Payton. Still not high enough to go get a quarterback unless they were to trade up a ton, which herein lies the next problem. They don't have draft capital. They don't have salary cap. They're just in a very bad situation. They've had some players that just haven't stayed healthy, played up to par. Michael Thomas has been injury-ridden ever since his historic season. And, Marshawn Lattimore, they went and paid Tyrann Mathieu this past offseason, and he didn't play that well, not enough to get them to the playoffs, or there's not much to do there with that roster. And they are going to probably look to acquire a bridge quarterback while they sort of stumble around and figure out their direction. And they really need someone to guide them while they're restructuring contracts and while they're getting rid of these big cap hit guys. And I know they just restructured Marcus May's contract, but they have many more contracts to restructure. So they're in a very tough spot, but I think they're in the perfect spot for a bridge quarterback. Along with the rest of the NFC South, ironically, the Panthers also are in that same situation, but they have a higher draft pick. The Buccaneers could be a place for Carr because they, again, don't have a high enough draft pick without trading up to go get one of those top four quarterbacks, being Bryce Young from Alabama, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, Anthony Richardson from Florida, and Will Levis from Kentucky. So those teams are all in a very tricky spot, but I do believe that the New Orleans Saints, who have already met with Derek Carr, will be his final landing spot. So I have Carr going to the Saints. Could be a good little bridge piece, but we'll move on to the next one. Next, we have Daniel Jones. He's looking to get $30+ million a year, which he will receive from the Giants. First thoughts on this, I don't know if this is a good decision for that franchise. He had a good year. He looked super poised. I was really impressed with how poised he was. He made a lot out of nothing when it comes to wide receivers. So if they could really get a couple competent wide receivers, who knows what he could be. I don't see him being their future guy. I don't know what it is, but he's been all right throughout his first seasons. The whole story of this has always been he hasn't been given anything, and he really hasn't. And this year he showed up and still balled out with being given nothing. So it's going to be real interesting to see how his future goes, but this could set them back a bit if they go and extend Daniel Jones here and give him a big $35 million contract for years, and he ends up not being the guy. So they better hope they will pay him. I'm very solid on that. They will pay him, but I don't know if that's going to be the right decision in the long run. We will see. Next up, we have Geno Smith, who, comeback player of the year, comeback player of the last, I don't even know, many years. Really, you do not see guys that are bench warmers and, perennial backups. You don't see guys like that have a resurgence in the later stages of their career and put up as some said, MVP caliber season. Maybe not that heavy, but for a while there, it was MVP caliber. And even that's not the point that it was MVP. The fact that he was playing at a top 10, top 5 level for most of the season and led that roster to the playoffs is ridiculous and super impressive. And he will be paid by the Seahawks. I think it could be a contract that they can easily get out of, something 2 years probably, I would guess. And I don't think they may not shy away from taking a quarterback this year if they really believe in some project quarterback. So that will be interesting to monitor, but I do believe Geno Smith will be a Seahawk next year and that he's a good kind of bridge guy. So I really like Geno. I love the story, and I think he could be good for a couple more years. So it'll be interesting to see if they pick a guy to develop under him. Next up, we have DeAndre Payne from the Commanders. And DeAndre Payne is very sought after this offseason, as there's some teams with huge need at interior defensive line. DeAndre Payne's a defensive tackle, and he's just a brute. And there are teams that really need that this offseason, a couple of them being the Bears, the Seahawks, even teams like the Steelers, my Steelers, need interior defensive line help. And I have him going to the Seahawks, who need the most interior defensive line help. The Seahawks were exploited by the run game all year. If I had to pick a game to really showcase that, it would be the Panthers game towards the back stretch of the season. The Panthers have a really good rushing attack, even without Christian McCaffrey, which they traded to the 49ers. They really ran all over in a historic way over that Seahawks defense, and it's just so clear they need run defense help. They need edge help. They just need everything front seven when it comes to linebackers, interior defensive line, and defensive end, edge rushers. They need all of it. But their first big splash could be DeAndre Payne to really solidify that run game up the middle, and I think that's where DeAndre Payne would end up. Next up, we have Jesse Bates, the safety from the Bengals. And it's been pretty clear that Jesse Bates has been on his way out from the Bengals. He's a great player. They just don't have the cap to pay him. And they made that clear by drafting Dax Hill in the first round from Michigan this past draft. And Dax Hill kind of sat around and, has been learning to kind of take Jesse Bates' spot. It was very clear what direction they were going with that. They put the franchise tag on Bates last offseason to get one more year out of him. And he played well. And he will go find a starting spot on another team, and that team will be the Atlanta Falcons. They really need defensive help. The Falcons, their defense is not good in any aspect. They had the lowest amount of sacks this year, so they have no defensive front, which in turn leads to teams being able to pick them apart in the secondary. Because if you cause no pressure, they have all day to throw, and you just, you lose the advantage there. So they have some hope with A.J. Terrell, but they really need some more of it. And I think Jesse Bates is a move in the right direction to really solidify their secondary. He'd be a really good piece. They have a lot of cap room. It would be interesting to see, but I think that would be a great piece. Really, now they would have a good corner and a good safety. I like that move a lot. So Jesse Bates to the Falcons is my prediction. Next up, we have a few that are going to be maybe debatable, but I think that these guys stay. pretty much. Josh Jacobs, he got his 5th-year option declined and then brought out everything this season and really showed why they should not have declined it. But I do think the Raiders will bring him back. They don't have other good options at running back. Josh Jacobs really showed out this year. He really won them games, simply. He simply won them games. And he ran all over the Seahawks, as we were talking about the Seahawks rushing defense. But he just balled out and really carried that team, surprisingly. And I don't see him really being another fit for a team that's going to pay him a lot of money. And I think the Raiders don't have a better option to go to. So they will be taking Josh Jacobs back, and he's still going to be very productive on this next contract, and I think he will be retained by the Raiders, whatever that means for his future winning-wise. I don't have as much confidence in that, but I do believe he will be a Las Vegas Raider. So Josh Jacobs staying at the Raiders. Next up, we have Saquon Barkley with the Giants, and I do believe they're bringing Daniel Jones back. I do believe they'll keep Saquon as well. It worked this year. They got to the playoffs when they were never expected. There were some predictions out there, 2, 3, 4 wins all season, and they went out and made the playoffs. And won a playoff game. I don't know, don't mean to glance over that, but they went out and beat the Vikings in Minnesota. So let's not discredit that duo right there. I think they, go out and just pay those guys and keep that little core together, and then go see if they can add some wide receiver help and really bolster up that offense. I think that Saquon will stay. Again, these moves could be really bad for them. Saquon wasn't worth what he was drafted at, and he really didn't pay off because of the injuries. Nowadays you can see why they drafted him that early when he's healthy, because he's so elite, so agile, so just a combination of it all. Probably one of the most dynamic playmakers in the run game in the league. But the fact that he missed so much time early in his career proved to not be worth his draft pick. So extending him, they're betting on him staying healthy. Obviously, that's every running back, but with his injury past, they're really betting on him, but I think they will. I really do think they will. So I think both Daniel Jones and Saquon will be staying in New York for next year. And then finally, we have Tony Pollard, which he had a breakout year. He really showed that he was the running back one instead of Ezekiel Elliott. And Tony Pollard is explosive. I don't see many guys hit the hole like Tony Pollard hits the hole. And his burst is outstanding. And I think he could be one of their main weapons on that Cowboys team. The Cowboys always pride themselves on good running backs, great offense, and I think Pollard is a key to that offense. He showed it all year. He did get hurt, and that's going to hurt a lot. He got hurt in the playoffs, so going into next year, he probably still will be recovering / injured. So that's going to hurt his contract discussions, but I do still see him being retained by the Cowboys. Ezekiel Elliott, on the other hand, I do not. Unless he takes one of the biggest pay cuts that's possible, I don't see him staying on that team next year. I do think Tony Pollard will head up that team. I do think there is a world where Ezekiel Elliott finds a home on another team, and Bijan Robinson out of Texas will be drafted by the Cowboys this year. And I can see a dynamic duo between Tony Pollard and Bijan Robinson. And that just seems like a very Cowboys thing to do, to really try to create those weapons in the backfield and, have those explosive plays come from, pass catching ability of Bijan and the explosive ability of Tony Pollard on outside runs and just his absolute burst through the secondary. I can see the Cowboys taking another guy there, but I do think Pollard stays. He played way too well this year. He really proved himself, and I think he will be back in Dallas next year. So those are my 10 free agent predictions, free agent / trade acquisition predictions for this offseason, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and it'll be interesting to check back on this and see how spot on I was. Hopefully 10 out of 10 with my picks. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.